Get into it, lovelies. Get into it. I am recovering from a really bad sinus headache I had yesterday. I had worked a double at work, so once I got home at 7:15, I literally went to sleep. Woke up 4 hours later, went back to sleep, took a Benadryl, slept all night, had therapy this morning, and I'm feeling so much better. And plus, I had a little banana. Well, this is the last one, but I had a banana, so I've been building up my potassium and hydrating and doing what I need to do to take care of myself. I just was not, like, I was quite dizzy yesterday at work, and thankfully I had a great friend who was looking out for me and made sure that I was taken care of and made sure I got home safely. So shout out to my friend Emma and Scott. Love y'all. Appreciate y'all. Shout out to my coworker Blair and CJ and Tracy and Raven. Everybody I got to work with yesterday. Thank you for making sure and taking the time to make sure that I was okay. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to read a story. As I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max, relax, and chillaxing time, in between time, mean time, scheme time, study time, break time, CP time. Anytime that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and many, many more in between. Okay. Trying to find the proper point. There it is. Okay. Right. The glasses, hold on. Chapter 2. Cat Fan's Way. So the last time we were here, Will Stanton, our main character from The Dark is Rising, as well as Greenwich, he is the last of the old ones. He has incredible magic powers. He has immense knowledge. Old one is only created and born one every 100 years. And so he's the last of them. So he has all of the knowledge of all those who have come before him and all those that could have been. And he has read the Book of Gramarye. His teacher and counselor and friend is Merriman Lion, aka Merriman, aka Merlin. And now he has been set on holiday for convalescence, for getting over sickness in Wales. Wales is a country that is in the British Isles, and quite frankly, in my opinion, is considered to be, I might be wrong, but for me, I feel like the Welsh are the indigenous people of Britannia. But that would be with the Anglo-Saxons, but I feel like the Welsh are also involved in that, and I'm going to do more research on that. But we are in Wales. We are hanging out with Will's cousins and other family members from his mother's side of the family. So now we're going to get involved in this story, because Will has finally remembered the thing he's been looking for, which is the Grey King. We're going to get some insight as to what's going on. You see, said Aunt Jane, I told you it would clear up. Will swallowed his last mouthful of bacon. You wouldn't think it was the same country. Marvelous. Morning sunshine streamed like banners through the windows of the long farmhouse kitchen. It glinted on the blue slabs of the floor, on the willow-patterned china set out on the enormous black dresser, on the shelf of beaming Toby jugs above the stove. A rainbow danced over the low ceiling, cast up in a sun spell from the handle of the glass milk jug. Warm, too, said Aunt Jen. We're going to have an Indian summer for you, Will, and fatten you up a bit, too, my dear. Have some more bread. It's lovely. I haven't eaten so much for months. Will watched small Aunt Jen with affection as she bustled about the kitchen. Strictly speaking, she was not his aunt at all, but a cousin of his mother's. The two had grown up as close friends and still exchanged quantities of letters, but Aunt Jen had left Buckinghamshire long before. It was one of the more romantic legends in the family, the tale of how she had come to Wales for a holiday, fallen shatteringly in love with a young Welsh farmer, and never gone home again. She even sounded Welsh herself now, and looked it with her small, cozily plump form and bright dark eyes. Where's Uncle David? He said. Out in the yard somewhere. It's a busy time of the year with the sheep. The hill farms send their yearlings down for the winter. He's drone to twin soon. He wondered if you would like to go too. Go to the beach. You could in this sunshine. Super. No swimming, mind, said Aunt Jen hastily. Will laughed. I know I'm fragile. I'll be careful. I love to go. I could send Mom a card saying I got here in one piece. A clatter and a shadow came in the doorway. It was Reese, disheveled, pulling off a sweater. Morning, Will. Have you left us some breakfast? You're late, Will said cheekily. Late, is it? Reese glared at him in mock fury. Just hear him, and he's out since 6 with only an old cup of tea inside. Tomorrow morning, John, we will pull this young monkey out of bed and take him with us. Behind him, a deep voice chuckled. Will's attention was caught by a face he had not seen before. It was a lean face with cheekbones carved high in it and many lines everywhere, creased upward now, round the eyes by smiling dark eyes, brown as coffee, thinning black hair streaked with gray at its sides, the well-shaped, mottled mouth of the Celt. For a moment, Will stared, fascinated. There was a curious, indefinable strength in this John Rowlands, even though he was not at all a big man. Kroisko, Will, said John Rowlands. Welcome to Clyd. I heard about you from your sister last spring. Clyd. There we go. Clyd. Good heavens, said Will in unthinking astonishment, and everyone laughed. Nothing bad, Roland said, smiling. How is Mary? She's fine, Will said. She said she had a marvelous time here last Easter. I was away too then, in Cornwall. He fell silent for a moment, his face suddenly abstracted and blank. John Rowlands looked at him swiftly, then sat down at the table where Reese was already poised over bacon and eggs. Will's uncle came in carrying a bunch of papers. Quipanad ode karad? Quipanad ode karad? Said Aunt Jen when she saw him. The loch far, said David Evans, taking the cup of tea she held out to him. And then I must be off to Twid. You want to come, Will? Yes, please. Maybe a couple of hours. The sound of the words was very precise always. He was a small, neatly made man, small, sharp-featured, but with an unexpectedly vague, reflective look sometimes in his dark eyes, which, by the way, the language that they are speaking is Welsh. Am I a master of Welsh? Not at all. I know some Welsh words and some pronunciations, so forgive me if I butcher them. And if I do, please politely message me, educate me, please. I am here to learn. I know a lot, but I have so much more to learn. Trust me. I have to go to the bank and to see Lul Thomas, and there'll be the new tire for the Land Rover. The car that jumped up in the air got itself a puncture. Reese, with his mouth full, made a strangled noise of protest. Now, he said, swallowing. I know how it sounded, but I really am not mad. There was nothing that could have made her swerve over to the side like that and hit the rock. Unless the steering rod is good. There's nothing wrong with the steering of that car, David Evans said. Well then, Reese said with all elbows and indignation. I tell you, she just lurched over for no reason at all. Ask Will. It's true, Will said. The car did just sort of jump sideways and hit that rock. I don't see what could have made it jump unless it had run over a loose stone in the road, but that would have had to be a pretty big stone, and there was no sign of one anywhere. Great allies you two already are, I see, said his uncle. He drained his teacup, gazing at them over the top. Will was not sure whether or not he was laughing at them. Well, I will have the steering checked anyway. John, Reese, now that extra fencing for the front. They slid into Welsh, unthinking. It did not bother Will. He was occupied in trying to scorn away a small voice in the back of his mind. An irrational small voice with an irrational suggestion. If they want to know what made the car jump, this part of the mind was whispering at him, why don't they ask Craddock Pritchard? David Evans dropped Will at a small newsagent's shop where he could buy postcards and chug off to leave the Land Rover at a garage. Will bought a card showing a sinister dark lake surrounded by very Welsh-looking mountains. Wrote on it, I got here. Everyone sends their love. And sent it off to his mother from the post office. A solemn and unmistakable red brick building on a corner of Twin High Street. Then he looked about him, wondering where to go next. Choosing at random, hoping to see the sea, he turned right up at the narrow, curving High Street. Before long, he found that there would be no sea this way, nor anything but shops, houses, a cinema with an imposing Victorian front, grandly labeled assembly rooms, and the slat-roof lich gate of a church. Will liked investigating churches before his illness had overtaken him. He and his two friends from school had been cycling all over the Thames Valley to make brass rubbings. He turned into the little churchyard to see if there might be any brassers here. The church porch was low-roofed, deep as a cave. Inside, the church was shadowy and cool with sturdy, white-painted walls and massive white pillars. nobody was there. Will found no braziers for rubbing, but only monuments to unpronounceable benefactors like Gruffyd Abada of Yunis Mengwyn Hall. Well, by the time I finish reading this book, I probably will know some Welsh, so there we go. Gruffyd Abada of Yunis Mengwyn Hall. At the rear of the church on his way out, he noticed a strange, long, gray stone stepped up at the end with incised marks too ancient for him to decipher. He stared at it for a long moment. It seemed like an omen of some kind, though of what significance he had not the least idea. But then in the porch on his way out, he glanced idly up at the notice board with its scattering of parish news, and he saw the name, Church of St. Cadfan. The swirling came again in his ears like the wind. Staggering, he collapsed onto the low bench in the porch. His mind spun. He was back suddenly in the roaring confusion of his illness, when he had known that something most precious had slipped or been taken away from his memory. Words flickered through his consciousness without ordering or meaning, and then a phrase surfaced like a leaping fish. On Cadfan's way where the kestrels call. His mind seized it greedily, reaching for more, but there was no more. The roaring died away. Will opened his eyes, breathing more steadily, the giddiness draining gradually out of him. He said softly aloud, on Cadfan's way where the kestrels call. On Cadfan's way. Outside in the sunshine, the gray slab tombstones and green grass glimmered, with jeweled glints of light here and there from droplets of rain still clinging to the longest stems from the day before. Will thought, on the day of the dead, the Grey King... Excuse me. There must have been some sort of warning about the Grey King, and what is Cadfan's way? Oh, he said aloud in a sudden fury. If only I could remember. He jumped up and went back to the news agent's shop. Please, he said, is there a guide to the church or to the town? Nothing on Twin. Nothing on Twin, said the red-cheeked girl on the shop in her sublimed Welsh lilt. Too late in the season you are. But Mr. Owen has a leaflet for sale in the church, I think. And there is this, if you like, full of lovely walks. She showed him a guide to North Wales for 35 pence. Well, said Will, counting out his money rather reluctantly, I can always take it home afterwards, I suppose. It'd make a very nice present, said the girl earnestly. Got some beautiful pictures it has. And just look at the cover. Thank you, said Will. When he peered at the little book outside, it told him that the Saxons had settled Twin at 516 AD round the church built by St. Cadfan of Brittany and his holy well, and that the inscribed stone in the church was said to be the oldest piece of written Welsh in existence, and it could be translated. The body of Sigyn is on the side between where the marks will be. In the retreat beneath the mound is extended Cadfan, sad that it would enclose the praise of the earth. May he rest without blemish. But it said not a word about Cadfan's way, nor would he, when he checked, did the leaflet in the church. Will thought, it is not Cadfan I want, it is his way. A way is a road. A way where the kestrels call must be a road over a moor or a mountain. It pushed even the seashore out of his mind when later he walked absent-mindedly for a while among the breakwaters of the windy beach. When he met his uncle for the ride back to the farm, he found no help there either. Cadfan's way, said David Evans. You pronounce it Cadfan, but the way, one F is always a V sound in Welsh. Cadfan's way. No, it does sound a bit familiar, you know, but I couldn't tell you, Will. John Rollins is the one to ask about things like that. He has a mind like an encyclopedia, does John, full of the old things. John Rollins was out somewhere on the farm busy, so for the time being, Will had to content himself with a much-folded map. He went out with it that afternoon alone in the sunlit valley to walk the boundaries of the farm. His uncle had roughly penciled them in for him. Clwyd was a lowland farm, stretching across most of the valley of the Decini River. Some of its land was marshy near the river, and some stretched up the soaring screech patch side of the mountain, green and gray and bracken brown, but most was lush green valley land, fertile and friendly, part of it left new plowed since the harvest of this year's crops, all the rest serving as pasture for square, sturdy Welsh black cattle. On the mountain land only sheep grazed. Some of the lower slopes had been plowed. though even they looked so steep to Will that he wondered how a tractor plowing them could have kept from rolling over. Above those, nothing grew but bracken, groups of wind-warped, scrubby trees and grass. The mountain reared up to the sky, and the dark, aimless call of a sheep came now and then floating down into the still, warm afternoon. It was by another sound that he found John Rowlands unexpectedly as he was walking through one of the cleared fields towards the river, with a high, wild hedge on one side of him and the dark, plowed soil on the other. He heard a dull, muffled thudding somewhere ahead. Then suddenly at a curve in the field he saw the figure, moving steadily and rhythmically as if in a slow, deliberate dance. He stopped and watched, fascinated. Rowlands, his shirt half open and a red kerchief tied around his neck, was making a transformation. He moved gradually along the hedge, first chopping carefully here and there with the murderous tool like a cross between an axe and a pirate's cutlass, then setting this down and hauling and interweaving whatever remained of the long, rank growth. Before him, the hedge grew wild and high, great arms groping out uncontrolled in all directions, and as the hazel and hawthorn did their best to grow into the full-fledged trees. Yes. Movement. No, just kidding. Actually. Where is it? Yeah. Movement. Movement. Movement! Hello, happy people. It's been some time. I am here visiting and listening to this wonderful story. So, hold your horses. Be patient. It's okay. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. Let's get back to the story. I have many puppets, and I use them for specific stories. And I just felt like he just wanted to come down and just be goofy, as always. Behind him as he moved along his relentless swaying way, he left instead a neat fence, scores of beheaded branches bristling waist-high like spears, with every 50 branch bent mercilessly down at right angles and woven in along the rest as if it were part of a hurdle. Will watched silent until Rowlands became aware of him and straightened up, breathing heavily. He pulled the red kerchief loose, wiped his forehead with it, and retied it loosely round his neck. In his creased browed face, the lines beside the dark eyes turned upwards just a little as he looked at Will. I know, he said, the velvet voice solemn. Your thinking here is the wonderful, healthy hedge full of leaves and hawthorn berries, reaching up to the heavens, and here's this man hacking it down like a butcher jointing a sheep, take me into a horrified little naked fence, all bones and no grace. Will grinned. Well, he said, something like that, yes. Ah, said John Rowlands. He squatted down on his haunches, resting his axe head down on the ground between his knees and leaning on it. Dua. It's a good job you came along. I cannot go as fast as I used to. Well, let me tell you now, if we were to leave this lovely wild hedge the way it is now and has been for too long, it would take over half the field before this time next year. And even though I'm cutting off its head and half its body, all those sad bent-over shoots that you see will be sending out so many new arms next spring that you will hardly notice any difference in it at all. Now that you kind of mention it, said Will, yes, of course, the hedging is just the same at home in Bucks. It's just that I never actually watched anyone doing it before. Had my eye on this hedge for a year, John Rowland said. It was missed last year. Like life it is, Will. Sometimes you must seem to hurt something in order to do good for it. But not often a very big hurt, thank goodness. He got on his feet again. You look more healthy already. Budgeon. The Welsh sun is good for you. Will looked down at the map of his hand. Mr. Rowlands, he said, can you tell me anything about Catfan's Way? The Welshman had been running one tough brown finger along the edge of his mattock. There was a second pause in the movement, and then the finger moved on. He said quietly, now what put that into your head, I wonder? Bachkin. I feel like Bachkin is like a term for like young man or young boy. Like, oi, boyo! I don't really know. I suppose I must have read it somewhere. Is there a Catfan's Way? Oh, yes, indeed, John Rowland said. Luinber Cadfan. No secret about that. Though most people these days have forgotten it. I think they had a Katfan road in one of the new twin housing estates instead. Said Katfan was kind of a missionary from France in the days when Brittany and Cornwall and Wales all had close ties. 1400 years ago, he had his church in Twin and a holy well, and he is supposed to have founded the monastery on Inlil. That is in English, Bardsey as well. You know Bardsey Island, where the bird watchers go, all off the tip of North Wales? People used to visit Twin and go on to Bardsey, and so they say there's an old pilgrim's road that goes over the mountain from Machynlleth to Twin, past Abergino Loen, Twin, Abergino Loen, Machynlleth, and along the sides of this valley, no doubt, or perhaps higher up. Most of the old ways go along high places. They were safe there, but nobody knows where to find Katvan's way now. I'm gonna just tell y'all right now, I never said I knew Welsh. Never said I was a master of the language. I know certain phrases and certain names, so forgive me if I butcher some of these pronunciations. This is why we read, in order to learn. It's okay. I see, said Will. It was more than enough. He knew that now he would be able to find the way, given time. But increasingly, he felt that there was very little time left, that it was urgent for his quest, so oddly lost by his memory, to be accomplished very soon, on the Day of the Dead. And what was the quest, and where, and why? If only he could remember. John Rowlands turned towards the hedge again. Well, I'll see you later, Will said. Thank you. I'm trying to walk all around the edge of the farm. Take it gently. That is a long walk for a convalescent. The whole of it. Roland straightened suddenly, pointing a finger at him in warning. And if you go up the valley and get into the Craigie Head that way, make sure you check the boundaries on your map, but do not go over off your uncle's land. That is Caradoc Pritchard's farm beyond, and he is not kind with trespassers. Will thought of the malicious light-lashed eyes and the sneering face he had seen from the Land Rover from Reese. Oh, he said. Caradoc Pritchard. All right. Thanks. Dolikian Far? Is that right? John Rowland's face broke into creases of laughter. Not bad, he said, but perhaps you should stick to just Diolch. The gentle thud of his axe dwindled behind Will and was lost in the insect hum of the sunny afternoon. With the scattered calls of birds and sheep, the way that Will was going led sideways across the valley with the gray-green sweep of the mountain rising always before him. It was blocked out more and more of the sky as he walked on. Soon he was beginning to climb, and then the bracken began to come in over the grass in a rustling knee-high carpet, with clumps here and there of spiky green gorse, its yellow flowers still bright among the fierce prickling stalks. No hedge climbed the mountain, but a slate-topped dry stone wall curving with every contour, broken now and then by a stile step low enough for men but too high for a sheep. Will found himself losing breath far more quickly than he would have normally done. As soon as he came next to a humped rock the right size for sitting, he folded thankfully into a panting heap. While he waited for his breath to come properly back, he looked at the map again. The cleared farmland seemed to end about halfway up the mountain, but there was of course nothing to guarantee that he would come across the old Katfan's way before he reached the boundary. He found himself hoping a little nervously that the rest of the mountain above was not Caradoc Pritchard's land. Stuffing the map back into his pocket, he went on higher through the cracking brown frods of the bracken. He was climbing diagonally now as the slope grew steeper. Birds whirled away from him, swirling high above. A skylark was pouring out its rippling, throbbing song. Then all at once, Will began to have an unaccountable feeling that he was being followed. Abruptly, he stopped, swinging round. Nothing moved. The bracken-brown slope lay still beneath the sunshine, with outcrops of white rock glimmering here and there. A car hummed past on the road below, invisible through trees. He was high above the farm now, looking out over the silver thread of the river to the mountains rising green, gray, and brown behind, and at last fading blue into the distance. Further up the valley, the mountainside on which he stood was clothed dark green with plantations of spruce trees, and beyond those he could see a great gray-black crag rising, a lone peak lower than the mountains around it, yet dominating all the surrounding land. A few large black birds circled its top as he watched. They merged together into the shape of a long V as geese do, and flew unhurriedly away over the mountain in the direction of the sea. Then, from somewhere close, he heard one short, sharp bark from a dog. Will jumped. No dog was likely to be on the mountain alone, yet there was no sign of another human being anywhere. If someone was nearby, why was he hiding himself? He turned up to go on up the slope, and only then did he see the dog. He stood stone still. It was poised directly above him, alert, waiting, a white dog, white all over, with only one small black patch on its back, like a saddle. Except for the curious pattern of coloring, it looked like a traditional Welsh sheepdog. Muscular, sharp-muzzled, with feathered legs and tail, a small version of the collie. Will held out his hand. "Here, boy," he said, but the dog bared its teeth and gave a low, threatening growl deep in its throat. That was actually pretty good. Will took a few tentative steps up the slope diagonally in the direction that he had been going before. Crouching on its stomach, the dog moved with him, teeth glittering, tongue lolling. The attitude was odd and yet familiar, and suddenly Will realized that he had seen it the evening before, the two dogs in his uncle's farm that had been helping Reese bring in the cows to be milked. It was the movement of control, the watchful crouch from which a working sheepdog would spring to bring an order the animals who was driving in a particular direction. But where was this dog trying to drive him? Clearly, there was only one way to find out. Taking a deep breath, Will turned to face the dog and began deliberately clambering straight up the slope. The dog stopped, and the low, low growl began again in its throat. It crouched, back curved as if all 4 feet were planted like trees in the ground. The snarl of the white teeth said very plainly, "Not this way." But Will, clenching his fist, kept climbing. He shifted direction very slightly so that he would pass close to the dog without touching it. But then unexpectedly, with one short bark, the dog darted towards him, crouching low, and involuntarily, Will jumped and lost his balance. He fell sideways on the steep hillside, desperately reaching his arms wide to stop himself from rolling headlong down. He slithered and bumped upside down for a few wild yards, terror loud as a shout in his head, until his fall was checked by something jerking fiercely at his sleeve. He came up against a rock with a numbing thud. He opened his eyes. The line where mountain met sky was spinning before him. Very close was the dog, its teeth clamped on the sleeve of his jacket, tugged him back, all warm breath and black nose and staring eyes, and at the sight of the eyes, Will's world spun round and over again so fast he thought he must still be falling. The roaring was in his ears again, and all things normal became suddenly chaos. For this dog's eyes were like no eyes he had ever seen. Where they should have been brown, they were silver white. Eyes, the color of blindness, set in the head of an animal that could see. And as the silver eyes gazed into his, and as the dog's breaths panted out hot on his face in a whirling instant, Will remembered everything that his illness had taken from him. He remembered the verses that had been put in his head as a guide for the bleak, lone quest he was destined now to follow. Remembered who he was and what he was, and recognized the design that under the mask of coincidence had brought him to Wales. At the same time, another kind of innocence fell away, and he was aware, too, of immense danger like a great shadow across the world, waiting for him all through this unfamiliar land of green valleys and dark misted mountain peaks. He was like a battle leader suddenly given news, suddenly made aware, as he had not been a moment before, that just beyond the horizon a great and dreadful army lay in wait, preparing itself to rise like a huge wave and drown all those who stood in his way. Trembling with wonder, Will reached across his other arm and fondled the dog's ears. It let go of his sleeve and stood there gazing at him, tongue-lolling peak from his pink-rimmed mouth. "Good boy," Will said, "good boy." Then a dark figure blotted out the sun, and he rolled abruptly over to sit up and see who stood outlined there against the sun. A clear Welsh voice said, "Are you hurt?" It was a boy. He was dressed neatly in what looked like a school uniform, gray trousers, white shirt, red socks, and tie. He had a school bag slung over one shoulder, and he seemed to be about the same age as Will. But there was a quality of strangeness about him as there had been about the dog, that tightened Will's throat and caught him motionless in about a wondering stare, for this boy was drained of all color. Like a shell bleached by the summer sun, his hair was white and his eyebrows. His skin was pale. The effect was so startling that for a wild moment, Will found himself wondering whether the hair was deliberately bleached, done on purpose to create astonishment and alarm. But the idea vanished as swiftly as it come. The mixture of arrogance and hostility facing him showed plainly that this was not that kind of boy at all. "I'm all right," Will stood up, shaking, pulling bits of bracken out of his hair and off his clothes. He said, "You might teach your dog the difference between people and sheep." "Oh," said the boy indifferently. He knew what he was about. He would have done you no harm. He said something to the dog in Welsh and trotted back up the hill and sat down beside him, watching them both. Well, Will began, and then he stopped. He had looked into the boy's face and found there another pair of eyes that shook him off balance. It was not this time the unearthliness he had seen in the dog. It was a sudden shock of feeling that he had seen them somewhere before. The boy's eyes were a strange, tawny, golden color, like the eyes of a cat or a bird, rimmed with eyelashes so pale as to be almost invisible. They had a cold, unfathomable glitter. "The Raven Boy," he said instantly. "That's who you are. That's what it calls you, the old verse. I have it all now. I can remember, but ravens are black. Why does it call you that?" "My name's Bran," the boy said, unsmiling, looking unwinking down at him. "Bran Davis. I live down on your uncle's farm." Will was taken aback for a moment. In spite of his new confidence, "On the farm?" "With my father in a cottage. My father works for David Evans." He blinked in the sunshine, pulled a pair of sunglasses from his pocket, and put them on. Which, by the way, kids, this describes a type of human being known as being albino or albinism. This is a form of being albino is, to my knowledge, the loss of pigmentation and having an incredibly strong sensitivity to heavy sunlight. To my knowledge, typically people who are albino have very pale, pinkish skin. They have white hair, white eyebrows, white eyelashes, and are very hypersensitive to sunlight. It is damaging to their skin, and it can cause them to get sick. Excuse me. And I actually had a friend in college and in high school who was albino, and very sensitive to sunlight. Still, cool people that just happen to have pale hair and pale hair and lashes and very pink skin. So, yeah, it was pretty cool. He said in exactly the same conversational tone, "Bran is really the Welsh word for crow, but people call Bran in the old stories are linked up with the raven too. A lot of ravens in these hills they are, so I suppose you could say the Raven Boy if you wanted. Poetic license like." He swung the satchel off his shoulder and sat down beside Will on a rock, fiddling with the leather strap. Will said, "How did you know who I was? That David Evans is my uncle." "I could just as well ask how you know me," Bran said. "How did you know to name me the Raven Boy?" He ran one finger idly up and down the strap, then he smiled suddenly, a smile that illuminated his pale face like quick flaring fire, and he pulled off the dark glasses again. "I will tell you the answer to both questions, Will Stanton," he said. "It is because you're not properly human, but one of the old ones of the light, put here to hold back the terrible power of the dark. You're the last of that circle to be born on Earth, and I've been waiting for you." And that is where we're going to end for today. And actually, you get to see a picture of Bran right here. That's Bran. Yep. And he's actually one of my favorite protagonists in fiction. And I'll explain why that is once we get to that point. Okay? But without further ado, I bid you all a great afternoon. Please be good. Take care of yourself. Enjoy this beautiful Wednesday, my favorite day of the week. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.